Frost curled like smoke around the towers of the polar shipyard. Beneath the auroras, engineers in thermal suits hold steel girders into position, their breath rising in clouds that caught the pale floodlights. The steady hum of turbines and the rhythmic clang of alloy against alloy had become the heartbeat of Earth's quiet future. Massive hulls rested half-buried in ice channels, their skeletal frames waiting for engines, waiting for the day humanity might need them. For now they were shadows, potential rather than power. The men and women who worked here spoke of them in whispers, as if naming them too boldly might tempt the stars to notice. That morning began as any other. Admiral Julius Keene walked the central gantry, eyes fixed on a half-complete cruiser's keel stretching like a frozen river under the dome. He carried himself like a man who expected something to break at any moment, shoulders tight even when the world seemed calm. Down below, President Annika Rowe toured with a small escort, listening with measured patience as engineers explained fabrication delays and energy costs. The shipyard was the crown jewel of a quiet buildup, a symbol of independence, but one she hoped never to use. The stillness ended in a heartbeat. Alarms shivered through the steel. Operators froze mid-step as every comm channel lit up with a signal that was not their own. Across the shipyard, projectors flickered awake, casting the same impossible figure into the frozen air. It was not a shape meant for human eyes, tall, crystalline, faceted wings that bent light into a spectrum halo. The envoy's body refracted itself in shifting layers, like glass struck by starlight. A resonant hum rolled through the gantries before it spoke, its voice vibrating inside bones more than ears. "I am the voice of the Varus Dominion," it declared. "By order of the accorded triad, Earth is summoned to choose its place." Keene's jaw clenched. Workers abandoned tools to gather beneath the projections, faces pale in the aurora light. Rowe gave a single nod, and the council chamber within the shipyard dome was sealed and linked to the transmission. 4 figures stood together before the image: Rowe, Keene, Dr. Mira Danton, and Dr. Pavel Korin. They had expected this day eventually, though none had said it aloud. The envoy's wings shifted, projecting 3 banners into the air, 3 futures held out like bait. The first was the Dominion itself, militarist and proud. Fractal warships lined the projection, each hull shimmering with lattice blades that cut through void and matter alike. "Order, honor, uniformity," the envoy intoned. "The Dominion offers you cohort status. Join our shield. Receive our protection. In exchange, your children will be raised within the codes of unity. Your armies will swear to our banner. Your culture will merge with ours." The images lingered. Earth soldiers in Dominion armor, Earth cities refitted into grid-perfect colonies. Keene's fists tightened. The second banner unfurled as vast engines drained gas giants of their mass. The Hallocrest Consortium, whose insignia glowed like a coin stamped into the void. Sleek gravity harvest rigs arced across the projection, turning entire atmospheres into fuel. Profit, expansion, resource tithe. The consortium offers accelerated trade. Your industries will leap centuries in a decade. In return, you will supply labor and raw matter. Your people will work, and they will be rewarded by order of production. Danton's lips pressed thin as she watched human silhouettes chained to loading bays in the hologram, their heads bowed beneath the weight of rigs. The third banner came cold and white, runes of logic spiraling without end. The Orthan Syndics appeared not as people but as faceless silhouettes crowned with synapse engines, neural webs stretching across their fleet. Knowledge, rationality, efficiency. We offer the libraries of 10,000 years. Every human mind enhanced, every decision optimized. In return, you surrender sovereignty to algorithmic governance. Choice is waste. Emotion is inefficiency. We will cure you of both. Corin exhaled sharply, recognizing the lure, an end to hunger, an end to chaos, at the cost of humanity itself. The envoy's 3 wings folded back into a single body. Neutrality is impossible. Choose your benefactor or you will be corrected. The chamber fell silent. Breath steamed in the cold air. Keen broke it first. It's coercion dressed as opportunity. The Dominion wants our soldiers. The Consortium wants our labor. The Syndics want our minds. Different chains, same prison. His voice carried the clipped certainty of a man who had seen every promise weaponized. Ro kept her eyes on the envoy, her face carved from calm steel. We hear the offers. We understand the prices. She turned slightly toward her counsel. Dr. Danton, the anthropologist folded her hands. Every path means the loss of cultural agency. We would no longer tell our own story. Children raised by code or coin or creed that is not ours would no longer be ours at all. Her voice wavered only once, when she spoke the word children. Dr. Corin added, almost reluctantly, the Syndic's data would advance us by centuries, but once seeded, there is no return. Our governments would dissolve into logic webs, our choices rewritten as variables. He looked at Ro. There is no reclaiming what's surrendered. Ro absorbed their words in silence. She had known this moment would come, had rehearsed lines in the privacy of her quarters. Yet in that instant, the truth came simple and steady, stripped of ornament. She stepped forward, her voice low but carrying to every receiver. Earth will not choose chains, gilded or otherwise. We will remain as we are. We will remain free. The envoy's form stiffened, refracted light twitching in sharp angles. A vibration pulsed through the chamber as if the air itself disapproved. Neutrality, it said, is an illusion. You cannot stand apart. You cannot remain untouched. If you will not align, then you will be broken. The children you protect will be remade to serve a greater order. At that word, Danton's face went pale. Keen's hands curled into fists. Corin's eyes flicked to Ro, searching for the flicker of fear, but found only iron calm. The envoy unfurled its wings in a final flare of crystalline light. Then you will learn what happens to those who stand alone. With that, the projections shattered into static. The chamber lights flickered back to normal. Silence hung heavy over the council. Ro inhaled once, slow and measured, then spoke without looking at her companions. Begin contingency preparations. All of them. In the shipyard outside, workers watched the last glimmer fade into the polar night, their tools hanging loose in their hands. For the first time, the steel arcs of the half-built hulls seemed less like shadows of a distant future, and more like the walls of a fortress they would need sooner than anyone had dared to believe. Snow drifted across the polar shipyard like ash, carried on winds that never ceased. 5 years had passed since the envoy's threat, and the shipyard had become something different, no longer just a place of industry but a crucible of quiet steel. From orbit, the half-buried hulls now resembled teeth breaking through ice, each one armed with more than bulkheads and reactors. Their forms spoke of preparation, not hope. Outwardly, Earth's stance had not changed. No banners were raised, no declarations broadcast. The planet remained silent in the face of the Triad's ultimatums. But beneath that silence, the foundations shifted. Engineers worked in hidden dry docks, pilots trained until their bodies cracked under strain, and children learned evacuation drills before they could recite multiplication tables. Every motion carried the weight of expectation, that when the Triad returned, Earth would not be caught unready. The first transformation came in propulsion. Human physiology, long considered a weakness in spaceflight, became a weapon. Centrifuge chambers spun young pilots until their vision narrowed and blackness pressed in. Many staggered out broken, blood vessels ruptured, nerves damaged. A fraction endured, and those few learned to ride acceleration curves that would snap bones in other species. They called it stunt vectoring, microcraft darting like stones skipped across water, dancing in thrust profiles no algorithm dared simulate. Admiral Keene observed the training quietly, recording every failure and every victory. "We will never outnumber them," he told Rowe during one midnight session, "so we must outmaneuver them." Next came logistics. Asteroids were seeded with disguised habitats, each appearing to be little more than rock drifting in the belt. Inside, modular bays stored supplies, weapons, and hidden thruster packs. Entire families lived within the shells, children playing in hollowed tunnels, their laughter muffled by walls of iron. The strategy was brittle. One miscalculation and a mining survey could uncover the deception. Yet it gave Earth what it had never possessed before: depth. A scattered web of fortresses invisible to passing scans, waiting to ignite when called. To the untrained eye, it was just debris. To those who knew, it was a sleeping arsenal. Stealth grew teeth of its own. Ghost relays were built in secret and anchored into the shadows of planetary rings and comet tails. Each relay was fragile, a whisper of circuitry powered by captured light, relaying signals through layers of reflection. A heavy scan could burn them out instantly. But in their delicate silence lay strength. They created a lattice of shadows across the solar system, a web of communications invisible to conventional eyes. Orders could be given without betraying position, fleets guided by phantoms across the void. The first time Keene tested the system, he watched 3 squadrons of drones appear to converge on an enemy contact that did not exist, fooling his own best analysts. He smiled for the first time in years. The most dangerous breakthrough was in minds, not machines. Dr. Corrin's laboratories produced heuristic AIs designed not to solve problems with linear precision, but to imitate human intuition. They were unpredictable, messy, sometimes dangerously so. One simulation collapsed when the AI sacrificed a third of its own assets in an unexpected maneuver, only to cripple the opposing fleet in return. Corrin reported this with discomfort. "It learns chaos from us," he admitted. "But if chaos is what they cannot counter, then perhaps this is our only path." The Council accepted the cost. The machines were not tools of perfect order but reflections of humanity's own restless improvisation. It was not only weapons that hardened in those years. Stories arrived, smuggled through desperate channels, carried by ships whose hulls bore the scars of pursuit. Refugees staggered into Earth's orbit, gaunt and broken, their voices trembling with memories of the Triad's corrections. One account spread across the Council like a wound. A mother from a mining outpost described how Halocrest enforcers had divided families into labor units. Children deemed excess were taken into cargo bays, their cries muffled by steel walls. She held up a doll, its fabric torn, found crushed in an airlock after the bay vented to space. Danton wept openly in the chamber when she heard it, her hands trembling as she reached for the toy. The story traveled far, whispered in bunkhouses and classrooms alike, until every worker in every dock understood what was at stake. It was not only freedom that hung in the balance, it was the fate of their children. In one closed session, Danton spoke plainly. "We are not a people unified by blood or creed. We are fractious, argumentative, divided, but there is one line none of us will cross. Harm our children and we will burn everything to the ground before we bow. That is what they do not understand, and that is what they will face if they come." Her words became doctrine, etched into Keene's battle manuals and whispered in pilot barracks. Protect the children. Everything else could be sacrificed. The Council adapted accordingly. Colonies, once built as fragile extensions of Earth, were refitted into fortress nodes. Each one carried hidden weapons beneath its agricultural domes and evacuation corridors drilled into its bedrock. Supply ships were camouflaged as traders, hauling relief goods by day and weapon components by night. Even civilian schools became part of rehearsed evacuation webs. Children learned how to enter shelters, how to move through underground corridors, how to sing certain tones that masked their voices against scanners. What seemed like innocent games carried lethal purpose. Roe oversaw all of it with the same calm resolve that had marked her refusal. She walked the shipyard floors, speaking quietly to engineers. She visited training chambers, laying a hand on the shoulder of recruits staggering from centrifuges. She did not speak in speeches or grand declarations. Her words were few, but they carried weight. "They will come for us. We will meet them together." Corin remained uneasy. He tracked every anomaly in the heuristic AIs, watching as their simulations grew more erratic. "They mimic us too well," he warned. "What if they turn?" Keen dismissed the concern with a clipped reply. "Then we cage them tighter. Better a wild ally than no ally at all." Danton argued that the unpredictability was not a flaw but a mirror. "It is the very thing that makes us dangerous." 5 years of this work carved steel into Earth's bones. Outwardly, the planet remained quiet. No grand fleets patrolled the skies, no banners challenged the triad. But within the silence, humanity had shaped something sharper than numbers, doctrine, born of necessity. The quiet ended as it had before, with a transmission, but this time it was not a single envoy. All 3 factions spoke at once, their signals braided together into a single ultimatum. The Dominion's voice carried like steel striking stone. "Submit your armies to our command or face erasure." The consortium's words dripped with avarice. "Surrender your labor and your children will live to serve. Resist, and they will not." The Syndic's tones fell cold and final. "Your sovereignty is waste. Choose logic or be excised from the order of progress." The message was punctuated with an image, not Earth itself, but a composite rendering of children in classrooms, their faces erased, replaced by the insignias of the triad. The implication was clear. Neutrality had reached its end. In the council chamber, the silence that followed was heavier than any before. Keen's jaw tightened as he studied the projection, while Corin muttered under his breath about inevitability. Danton closed her eyes, her voice breaking. "They mean to take them. They mean to take them all." Roe remained still, her face a mask of calm steel. When she finally spoke, her words were a blade. "Then we will show them what it means to threaten the children of Earth." Jupiter loomed like a bruised giant, its storms rolling in silence across bands of copper and ochre. In the shadow of its mass, where sunlight barely reached, the Triad's combined fleet emerged. Lattice blade warships of the Varys glimmered like shards of crystal, their wings cutting through the dark. Behind them drifted the immense harvest rigs of Hallowcrest, engines glowing as if eager to drain the gas giant of its marrow. Towering above both were the Orthan Logic barges, vast slabs of synaptic metal crowned with networks of glowing nodes. It was an armada meant to terrify by scale alone, every hull a declaration of inevitability. Their commanders expected compliance, perhaps a token skirmish before surrender. They had studied Earth's history through fractured intelligence, a planet that fractured, bickered, and stalled. They anticipated scattered defenses, improvised outposts, a disorganized resistance that would fold under pressure. What they found instead was silence. No transmissions, no defensive fleets marshaled at the edge of the system, just the cold dark of Jupiter's shadow. Admiral Keen stood on the bridge of the Resolute, eyes fixed on tactical displays. Around him, the crew moved with quiet precision, voices clipped but steady. Beneath his feet, the decks thrummed with restrained energy. He waited, counting the heartbeats until the Triad pushed deeper into the kill zone. "Patience," he said, though the word was meant as much for himself as for his officers. "Let them believe." The first strike came without warning. What the Triad had assumed were drifting asteroids erupted into motion. Rock shells split apart, revealing swarms of micro-drones that ignited in bursts of thruster fire. They scattered across the void in patterns too chaotic to track, tiny sparks darting into formation. From the fleet's vantage, it was as if the stars themselves had shattered and taken flight. 1,000 cold sparks drifted across the beltwake, and then converged with lethal precision. Hornet swarm drones slammed into Varys lattices, piercing their resonance fields before detonating. Crystalline wings cracked apart, shards scattering like frozen glass. The consortium rigs fared no better. From the darkness, barnacle pods launched at speed, clamping onto hulls with magnetic teeth. Their drills chewed through armored plating, flooding the harvesters' interiors with boarding charges. Within minutes, the rigs were bleeding atmosphere into space. Then the ghost relays awoke. Across the Triad's comm channels, phantom fleets appeared, false signatures layered into sensor nets. Orthan analysts tried to recalibrate, but every adjustment birthed new ghosts. Fleets they swore were real dissolved into static, while friendly formations appeared hostile. Confusion rippled outward, and in that hesitation the humans struck. Keen's voice cut across the net, calm and exact. Delta 2 blind their aft array. Kites pivot shadow cone. Strike groups maintain dispersal. Orders were short, modular, mission-type commands that told pilots the intent, not every step. His officers relayed them with the same clarity, each unit free to improvise. It was a doctrine the Triad could not fathom. The centrifuge trained pilots dove into the fight. Their craft were smaller, lighter, lacking the thick armor of Triad designs. But they could twist into thrust curves that would have killed other species outright. One pilot pulled a suicidal loop beneath a consortium rig, slinging his craft into a blind cone where no turret could track. He launched a spread of missiles into the Harvester's engine cluster before blacking out from the G-load. His ship tore apart in the blast, but the rig split open, its spine burning in silence. Elsewhere, squadrons of kites, modular stealth craft, slid across shadow lines, their silhouettes disappearing against the backdrop of Jupiter's storms. They attacked sensors and comm relays first, not hulls. Varys ships, blind and cut off, fired blindly into their own formations. The Cassial grid, Earth's most dangerous creation, unleashed its full fury. The heuristic AI slipped into the Orthan fleet's synapse web, feeding it false correlations. It suggested patterns that weren't there, enemies where none existed. Logic barges recalibrated their fire solutions and turned on their own escorts, convinced they had uncovered hidden human formations. For the first time, Orthan logic stuttered under human-style chaos. On the bridge of the Resolute, Keen listened as enemy signals broke into panicked layers. Reports from his own units came crisp and clean. Delta 2 blind successful. Barnacles gnawing through Consortium Rig 5. Kites holding shadow cone. Every call was clipped, every pilot trained to speak in fragments that carried meaning. The battle became a storm of images. Gravity harvesters split open as barnacle pods gnawed through their cores, their once proud silhouettes tumbling like broken scaffolds. Varys lattices, once shimmering with crystalline precision, shattered into cascades of glassy shards. Amid the chaos, human microcraft left streaks of light as they twisted through impossible vectors. Yet the cost was real. Keen watched half a squadron vanish in a flare of wreckage, centrifuge pilots pushing too far past the edge of endurance. The Cassial grid, overwhelmed by feedback, began to buckle. Ghost fleets bled into human sensors, forcing commanders to rely on instinct when systems faltered. Keen's flagship shuddered as a lattice blade grazed its flank, venting an entire section to vacuum. The crew sealed it in seconds, but the warning was clear. Survival was not guaranteed. Amid the chaos, Keen ordered a transmission across all channels. His voice carried steady, clipped, undeniable. To all Triad vessels, This is Admiral Julius Keene of Earth. Cease fire and surrender. You will be granted the protections of law. Resist, and we will finish this." There was silence at first. Then, astonishingly, a handful of Orthan vessels powered down, their logic barges broadcasting compliance. Keene marked their signals and ordered his forces to spare them. But the Dominion and Consortium refused. Their ships fought on, even as their formations collapsed. The difference in doctrine became decisive. Human squadrons adapted in real time, shifting attacks without waiting for higher approval. Triad vessels stalled when their commanders were cut off, waiting for orders that never arrived. One consortium captain screamed for direction as barnacle pods tore through his rig. His superiors remained silent, trapped in confusion. By the time he acted, his ship was already falling apart. The climax came when the largest Varys lattice, a flagship crowned with fractal wings, drifted into the center of the field. Keene gave the signal. Rock swarm caches hidden in the belt ignited, shedding their camouflage. Hundreds of disguised munitions fired at once, converging in a blizzard of fire. The lattice's resonance fields lit like glass under a hammer, shattering in layers. The flagship imploded in silence, fragments scattering into the dark. The battle space grew still. Consortium rigs burned, Dominion lattices drifted broken, Orthan logic barges sat in stunned surrender. The ghosts faded, leaving only wreckage and silence. Keene stood unmoving on the bridge, the weight of loss heavy in his chest. Too many kites lost, too many pilots scattered into debris fields. Yet Earth still stood. Against impossible numbers they had held. Across the net, President Rowe's voice rose. She had chosen her moment well. Calm, steady, undeniable, it carried through every surviving ship, human and alien alike. "You chose the wrong enemy." For a long moment, the void answered with nothing but the crackle of failing comms and the whisper of drifting wreckage. Then, as Jupiter's storms turned in silence beneath them, the truth of it spread. The triad had been broken, not by greater strength, but by a people who refused to bow. The wreckage of iron snow still drifted in Jupiter's shadow when the first captured officers began to speak. They were brought aboard the Resolute under guard, crystalline shards of Varys and hollow-eyed Syndic overseers who had never expected to face chains themselves. Under questioning, their arrogance cracked into disbelief. One Orthan tactician whispered, almost to himself, "We believed humans fragile. We did not see the fire in their defense of children." His words spread among the crews, repeated in mess halls and hangars as both a warning and a vindication. The triad had miscalculated, and Earth's moral line had cut deeper than any blade. News traveled fast, carried on channels the triad could not silence. In the Dominion's outer provinces, miners who had long toiled under crystalline overseers turned their tools into weapons. Foundries that had once forged lattice wings for the fleets were seized, their workers declaring themselves free. In consortium strongholds, indentured laborers staged uprisings, storming harvest rigs and scuttling them before they could be reclaimed. One transmission showed a rig burning against the backdrop of a gas giant, workers cheering as its core collapsed. In Syndic space, the rebellion was quieter but no less profound. Researchers defected, smuggling data cores and logic maps to rebel enclaves. They abandoned the cold equations of their masters and sought out Earth, believing at last in a cause that valued more than efficiency. Into this, Fracture stepped a new ally. From the edge of contested space came the Orthan, a species of avian nomads whose wings stretched wide as sails. For centuries they had drifted between stars, their caravans raided and enslaved by the Dominion. Now, with the Triad's fleets shattered and their authority bleeding away, the Orthan arrived not as beggars but as partners. Their envoys stood before the Earth Council, feathers patterned in ceremonial hues, and spoke simply, "You fought not to conquer, but to protect. So do we. Let us fight together." Keen saw the opportunity, and Ro seized it. Earth could not stand alone forever, but it could become the seed of something new, a doctrine not of domination, but of survival and dignity. The Council codified their principles, short and sharp, carried in transmissions that would ripple through uprisings across the stars. Don't match strength, rewire the fight. Break supply, sensors, and story. Mission-type trust beats hierarchy. This was the Terran doctrine, a creed born not from centuries of empire, but from 5 years of desperation and a single moral line. It spread like fire through systems waiting for a spark. Small fleets of miners, rebels, and defectors began to fight in human style, cutting sensors, confusing stories, trusting initiative. In every clash, the triad found itself unraveling. The formal resolution came in fragments rather than a single declaration. First, the Dominion faltered, its honor code broken when its fleets returned crippled and its foundries in revolt. Then the consortium splintered, investors and governors abandoning ventures too costly to hold. The syndics clung to logic, but even algorithms cannot rule when their researchers flee. By the time emissaries arrived at Earth's orbit, it was not to dictate terms but to seek a mediated ceasefire. Ro received them with the same calm steel she had shown 5 years earlier. She did not claim victory, nor did she demand reparations. Instead, she convened the first talks of a cooperative alliance, not a new hegemony but a framework of survival. The Earthens stood beside her, their wings folded in solemn approval. It was not the birth of an empire, but something rarer, the first fragile step toward a balance of equals. When the last signatures were recorded and the delegates departed, the polar shipyard fell quiet again. Dr. Mira Danton walked its frost-covered corridors, her breath clouding in the cold. Outside, children played between the arches of unfinished hulls, their laughter echoing against steel and ice. She watched them for a long time, her heart heavy with the memory of the doll crushed in a refugee's hands. Humanity had not fought for power nor for glory. They had fought so those children could laugh in safety, so their futures would remain their own. In the observation dome, the auroras shimmered above the ice, casting green and violet fire across the snow. Danton whispered to herself, words that would later be carved into the walls of the shipyard and broadcast across allied worlds, "We guard the children's tomorrow."